Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Gemma from IDP Ielts in Australia. Today we're joined by Ielts expert Don Oliver, who'll be running a masterclass about writing task 2 for academic and general training. As always, Don will be answering your questions at the end of the masterclass, so please leave them in the comment section on Zoom or Facebook. Don, welcome back, over to you.
Thanks, Gemma. Nice to see you again after a little while.
You too.
So, thanks very much for that introduction. And as Gemma said, we're going to look at writing skills for IELTS academic and general training, task 2 today. And task 2 is always a difficult part of the test, and I sympathize with those people who find it difficult. But today we're going to try and show you how to make it a little bit easier. So today we're going to look at both the academic and the general training. And we're going to look particularly at the first assessment criterion, which in task 2 is called task response. In task 1, it's called task achievement. But the idea is the same. It's basically, do you understand the question? And do you respond to the question fully? We're going to look at the other assessment criteria as well. And there are 3 of those, remember. There's coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. And a special thing today, we're going to look at a couple of examples of task 2 essays. And these are real task 2 essays from IELTS test takers. One of them is a band 7. The other one is a band 6. And I'll try and explain to you why one is better than the other, which parts are better and which parts are worse. We'll look at the common mistakes that many people make, and I'll try and help you avoid those in the future. So let's analyze the task now. Let's look at task response. In an IELTS writing test, you are always told the same thing. The task is different, but your instructions about addressing the task are always the same. You are always told to give reasons for your answer. This is important. You need to support your argument. You have to present a position on the task. And the evidence, the support that you produce can be very personal. It doesn't have to be like an essay for a university lecturer. It can be personal, anecdotal. It can be not something that is from a book, but just something that you know about. And we tell you that. Include any relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. So the format of the task is always the same. You are presented with a statement. People say this. This is happening. Many people believe. And then you are asked to respond to that statement. Now, the response can be quite simple. It could be, to what extent do you agree? In other words, do you agree or not? Or it can be more complex. It could be, what are the reasons for this? And what are the effects? It could be, discuss both of these statements and give your own opinion. So in an IELTS task 2, you need to look at the task very carefully, because if you don't answer directly and fully, you will not get a good score for the first assessment criterion. You must give your opinion. And for some people, this is difficult. They're not taught to do this at school. So you need to become comfortable giving your own opinion about things. Let me remind you that one good way to see how to give an opinion is to look at opinion pieces in newspapers or magazines. People are writing task 2 essays every day. If you go to an opinion piece in a newspaper, you'll see someone giving an opinion. And remember, you must respond to every part of the task. We're going to look at that in some detail now. Here is an example of a task 2 task. And I'm asking you, how many parts are there to this task? Read it now. Music and film are important ways that a country expresses its culture. Governments should therefore support the local music and film industries financially. This is the statement. This statement has 2 sentences in it. It's quite complex. How many parts do you have to talk about in your essay? Well, we have to talk about music and film. If your essay is just talking about film, or if it's just talking about music, you won't get more than a band 5 for the first assessment criterion. We're talking about music and film not as a financial thing, we're talking about it as an expression of culture. So you have to talk about those things in those terms, how it expresses the character of a country, how it expresses the history of a country. Then we're asked about government support. Well, does the government simply give an award to someone, to a musician? No, we're asked about financial support. In other words, to what degree should the government give money to musicians and filmmakers? Do you see here that we have spent a couple of minutes analyzing the task in order to give an answer that will fully address the task? If you do this, you'll score highly in that first criterion, task response. You analyze and then you provide an answer that covers all of those things. Finally, you are asked to respond. And here the response is quite simple. Do you agree or not? Okay, let's practice this. Here is another task. In many countries today, people are choosing to have fewer children. Why? And what are the effects on society? So how many parts are there to this statement? The first statement, in many countries today, people are choosing to have fewer children. Well, it's a simple statement. It's really just one idea. People are having fewer children. But how many parts are there to the response? Well, there are 2. The reason and the effect on society. Now, this is important because you may be talking about the psychology of people. You may be talking about financial strains on people. You may be talking about why people don't want to bring children into the world when there's a pandemic, right? But you have to talk about the effect on, not individuals, on society. So will society be affected? That's an important thing. Again, we have analyzed the question and now we can give an answer that is complete. So you must do this for task response. Let's look at the other assessment criteria now. And the other assessment criteria, I think you probably know very well. They are the same for academic and general training, task 1 and 2. They are coherence and cohesion. They are lexical resource. They are grammatical range and accuracy. Let's look at each of these in turn and try and work out what they mean. What, for example, is coherence and cohesion? I hope you have in front of you or some access to the public version of the assessment criteria. You will find these on the Ielts.com website. If you have them in front of you now, look at them. Here they are on the screen, and we're going to look at each of these criteria in some detail. We already looked at task response. We already said that you have to address all parts of the task. And you can see there at band 7, that is something that you must do in order to get a band 7, 8, or 9. And a band 6 for that matter. But if you don't address the task, you won't get more than a band 5, maybe a band 4. To go to coherence and cohesion, you'll see that you are asked to use a range of cohesive devices. Words like so, but, of course, because, but more complicated ones too. On the other hand, as a matter of fact, as a consequence. But it's not just those words, it's also using articles, are and the. It's using pronouns correctly, it, those things. That is a part of coherence and cohesion. The way that we can understand how ideas are connected together, that is cohesion. And the other thing, important thing about this criterion is paragraphing. Each paragraph should be logical. It should have a central idea that you develop. In a task 2 essay, you really need a minimum of about 4 paragraphs. You would have an introduction, you would have a conclusion, and you would have a couple of paragraphs in the middle, maybe 3 paragraphs in the middle, 5 paragraphs in total. If you start writing 6 or 7 or 8 paragraphs, that's too many, because you are not developing one idea in each paragraph. If you only have 2 paragraphs, then really this is not good, because they are long paragraphs which probably contain more than one idea. They need to be split up. Aim for 4 or 5 paragraphs in task 2 writing. In lexical resource, remember, lexical resource just means your vocabulary. At a band 7, you only have occasional errors. That means not many, maybe 4 or 5 maximum spelling errors or errors in your choice of words. A band 7 is a strong speaker of English. Remember that. At a band 6, of course, you have more errors. But importantly, those errors do not affect the reader's understanding. And that's very important. If your errors begin to confuse the reader, then you can't get a band 6. So don't use a word that you're not sure about, okay? Stick with words that you understand and you are sure about using. And finally, grammatical range and accuracy. Again, in band 7, you only make a few errors in grammar. So if you're not sure about using tenses in English, if you're not sure about using prepositions, to, with, by, for, if you're not sure about using are and the, learn these things, because the more mistakes you make there, the lower your score will be for this criterion. And you'll see at band 6, you can make more errors, but these errors cannot confuse the reader too much. When they begin to confuse the reader, then you go down to a band 5. Okay, we've looked at all of the criteria, and just to sum up for you, the first criterion, task response, cover all parts of the question. Make your position clear. The second criterion, use paragraphing logically. Use markers, use words that connect ideas. So, but, as, because, after that, of course, if, then, obviously, first, secondly. These are the words that the examiner is looking for to give you a high score for coherence and cohesion. The third criterion, lexical resource, make sure your spelling is accurate. And remember, spend a bit of time at the end of your essay, 2 or 3 minutes, checking for spelling mistakes. And if you're doing the computer delivered test, IELTS computer test, especially be careful, because sometimes we type rather quickly and we make errors because of our fat fingers that we would never make with a pencil and paper. So check on that. Remember, for a band 7 and 8 and 9, you must be able to use some uncommon words in English. Words that are not just everyday words, but good words. So learn some of those words. And finally, grammatical range and accuracy. It's 2 things. Accuracy, as I said before, prepositions, articles, etc., tenses, but also range. Think about complex sentences that you are comfortable using. Think about relative clauses. This is something that is, these people are people who. Think about conditional sentences. If the government did this, then something would happen. These are complex sentences and the examiner is looking for them. Let's look more closely at coherence and cohesion. Here we look at band 8, and at band 8 you will see that you have to be able to basically control all aspects of cohesion satisfactorily. You need to be able to use paragraphing sufficiently and appropriately. That means if you have a 1-sentence paragraph, that's not really appropriate. If you make a few mistakes with pronouns, it or them or they, and we don't understand what they refer to, then you can't get an 8. At a band 7, you can make a few mistakes with those things, but not too many. Let's have a look at some aspects of coherence and cohesion, which are important. Remember, we were talking about paragraphing. So your first paragraph will be some sort of introduction and some way of expressing an opinion. So here is an example of a task. Some people believe modern methods of communication have made reading books unnecessary. That is the statement. The response, do you agree or disagree? What sort of words would we use to begin this essay? Well, we would write 2 or 3 sentences about the issue, about modern methods of communication, about the necessity of reading books. There are several reasons why people say this. For some years now, people have been worried about the level of reading in society. Reading habits have changed considerably over recent years. Here are ways that you might start an essay giving an opinion on this topic. You have set the scene for your response, and then you will give your opinion. In my opinion, you can use the word my, you can use the word I think. It's important to express an opinion. I believe. You might say, well, many people believe this and you disagree. You would use the word nevertheless. I nevertheless believe. I, however, believe. You are contrasting what other people think with what you think. Here you are clearly demonstrating a position in the first paragraph. It's important. Let's look at the end of your essay, your concluding paragraph. The same task, right? How would you end this essay? Well, you would write 2 or 3 sentences that rephrase the question and summarize your opinion. And you might even look towards the future. You would use words like this in conclusion. Finally, it's important to understand the process of reading. In summary, there are many opinions about reading. And you might use this phrase, in my opinion, again. You might look towards the future and say, I nevertheless believe that in years to come, reading will remain a vital part of people's lives. This is how you might end an essay, giving your opinion. If we're looking at other elements of coherence and cohesion, the linking devices, here is some examples. And very often they are adverbs, like similarly or surprisingly. Very often they are conjunctions, words that link 2 clauses together. Whereas, however. These are some examples of the sorts of words that link ideas together. So try and use these words as confidently and as easily as you can. The more you understand how these words are used, the better. And a great way to understand the use of these words is to read. The more you read, the better you'll be able to use words like this. So let's look at the 3rd criterion now, and that is lexical resource. And lexical resource is all about using a range of words. Here at band 8, uses a wide range of vocabulary and flexibly to convey precise meaning. In other words, you can say one word, you can write one word that has a slightly different meaning to a similar word, and you're able to use them in an effective way. At a band 7, you can use those less common words that I was talking about, and the words that you use will only be misspelt very occasionally. Okay. These are important elements of lexical resource. Let's look at another task. Some people complain that young people today are less polite than they were in the past. However, other people argue that young people should be encouraged to express their opinions honestly, even if this seems impolite. It's an interesting question. Here, the task is to discuss both views and give your own opinion. But we're not looking at task response now. We're looking more at the sorts of words that you might use to address this task. Well, what are some of the words you might use? You would be rephrasing the words that are given to you. We give you some words. Young people are less polite than they were in the past. You might rephrase this as they have somehow become ruder. Immediately, you are showing the examiner that you have a good grasp of different ways of expressing the same idea in English. They should be encouraged to express their opinions honestly, but you say they should be encouraged to speak out and voice their opinion. Again, you are telling the examiner that you are worthy of a band 8 or 9 because you are using words precisely, and they are your own words. They're not just the words that we give you in the task. If it seems impolite, may not always be appropriate, for example, is a synonym for that. And you're giving examples. Remember, you have to support your opinion, for example, when discussing politics. All of these things are telling the examiner that you are able to use English words flexibly. And if you look at your assessment criteria, you'll see that word flexibly occurring at band 7 and 8 and 9. Flexibility means you have a range of words that you can use at the right time. So we come to the final assessment criterion, and that is grammatical range and accuracy. So grammatical range and accuracy, we've talked about the differences between those things like less common words and errors in lexical resource. But here we're looking at grammar, and we're looking at a similar sort of thing. We're looking at the frequency of errors, and at band 8, the majority of sentences are error-free. This is very important. If you have a problem with any grammatical point in English, fix it up, because you won't get your band 8 or 9 unless you do. Okay, let's go on and look at the assessment criteria that we need to understand in order to get a good score for academic writing task 2. Here is another example of a task, and here the statement is quite long and a little bit complicated. It's a little bit complicated because we're talking about something that we understand, international tourism, but then we're asked to discuss its benefits and we're asked to discuss its impact, not just on the local inhabitants, but also on the environment. Now here we have something that is quite difficult, but task 2 writing is quite difficult. We have to do the same as we did before, and that is to analyze the task. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at someone who has addressed this task. And you'll see here that this person has scored an interesting collection of scores, an interesting variety of scores. For the task response, they get a 7. That means they have addressed all parts of the task. They've talked about the effect on the local inhabitants, and the effect on the environment. They've got a very good score for their lexical resource. They've shown that they can use English words flexibly and without much error at all. Their grammar is also quite strong, a band 7 for that. But their coherence and cohesion is not so strong. They only get a band 6 for that. Why? Well, let's look at it more closely. Here, we see that we have a good start. Tourism is a very big industry. And then they make a few errors which prevent them from getting the score that they need in coherence and cohesion. Do you see here? They say, arguments have come up regarding the benefits and negative impacts of tourism on places and on its local inhabitants. Now, why is this a problem? Remember I talked about pronouns before? What does the pronoun refer to? This is a part of coherence and cohesion. Talking about the impact of tourism on places and on its local inhabitants. Well, places is plural and its is singular. So its is meant to refer to places, but it's confusing for the reader. Does it refer to places or does it refer to tourism? If you keep going here, you'll see that there are other mistakes with pronouns. More money is circulated within the country, and even the stability of their currency's rate of exchange persists. Well, here, within the country is singular, but here we talk about their currency. Do you see here again? It's confusing. This person really should have said on countries, plural, and their currencies. That would be okay. Be careful when you're using a pronoun. Be careful that you understand what noun it refers to. And if that noun is singular, the pronoun is singular. If that noun is plural, the pronoun is plural. This is a common mistake that people make, and it is penalized under coherence and cohesion. We go on and we look at this, at the way this essay concludes, and we see a few more errors. We see some errors in terms of the more errors in terms of pronouns, locations such as pollution. This is completely wrong because pollution is not a location. Impacts such as pollution, yes, but not locations such as pollution. We have specific times can be allocated for tours to certain areas, such as peak times. Areas such as time. This is confusing. This is penalized under coherence because it confuses the reader. And these are all mistakes in pronouns and substitution. So this is an important element that we have to be careful about. This word where is the wrong pronoun. Certain peak times where, peak times when is the word that we need there. So there's an example of the sorts of errors that caused this person to only get a band 6 for their coherence and cohesion. But in terms of their lexical resource, of course, they got a high score. They got an 8 for that. Quite an impact. Adhere to their own beliefs and ways of life, etc. Specific times can be allocated. Change from their morals and ethics. Win-win is an idiomatic phrase. Poor countries with natural beauty. All of this is excellent. This person is strong in terms of their vocabulary, but weak in their ability to use pronouns. It's clear what this person must do to improve. Okay, let's go on. And here is what the examiner said about this task. And remember, I said this is a real test taker's essay. And you'll see that basically they repeated the same things that I just said then. Okay, we don't have much time to look at that. So let's continue. Here is another task. We've gone through a lot of tasks today. All of these tasks are authentic Ielts types of tasks. This one is about shopping. It's becoming more and more popular as a leisure activity. However, some people feel that this has both positive and negative effects. Why is it popular? And what are the effects on individuals and society? Important. When you're addressing this task, you need to talk about the effects on individuals and society. Remember what we did before. We tried to rephrase the given words. We tried to analyze how many parts there are to the statement. We tried to deliver the response that was required, and we tried to logically organize our answer into paragraphs. Well, this next essay that we see gets a band 6 for all of those criteria, and that means it's quite a good response, but it has quite a few errors. And just to look at some of those errors briefly, you'll see what they are. For example, this person makes a lot of spelling errors. And you'll see there, shopping as a leisure activity is an issue that erases. Sometimes shopping makes a person feel relaxed. Most of all, many shoppers feel proxy satisfaction when they have the right to choose something. The wrong words are chosen and spelling mistakes are quite frequent. So in this case, erases, this person should just say raises. Relaxed is misspelt, should be relaxed. This word proxy is not used correctly. Maybe it would be a better word to use counterfeit satisfaction. Right, instead of using the word right to choose, they should have the chance to choose. This word lead to violence of nature. Well, this word is the wrong word. Violation of nature is the correct word. This person needs to read more, talk more in English to other people, and pick up those words and learn how to spell them correctly. Okay, these are some of the grammatical errors that cause the band 6. Remember, a band 6 has a lot of errors, but we still understand what the person is saying. So here there are errors in articles and endless debates. You can't say that. Writing to about, that preposition is unnecessary. The reasons of shopping, the reasons for shopping, the wrong preposition. Kind of leisure, a kind of leisure activities, the plural is wrong there. And you can see all of those errors marked in green on your screen indicate that there are too many errors to get a band 7 for grammar. This person is a very typical band 6 in writing. This person may in fact get a better score in speaking because of course we don't have to assess anyone's spelling, but their use of those grammar errors will also affect their speaking score. Okay. That essay continues and finishes. There are quite a few paragraphs, and the paragraphing is not always logical. We won't keep looking at that because we're running out of time, and I want to get onto some questions, but it may be possible for us to put those essays up on our Facebook page for you to look at. Other types of questions you will find in Task 2 writing. There are many different types of questions, but these are some examples. Discuss both views and give your own opinion. Why is this and what can be done about it? In other words, what are the causes and what are the solutions to a problem? Is this true or not? And what is the best way to solve the problem? What are the benefits? And which is the best of these options? These are typical Task 2 types of task. Some of the mistakes that people make, and we've already mentioned quite a few of them, but in terms of how you approach the test, these are the most common ones. Sometimes people do not spend enough time understanding the task. They need to spend a couple of minutes understanding how many parts there are in a Task 2 and plan their essay accordingly. You need to be able to rephrase the words that are given to you, and you can practice doing this. Talk to your friends about it. Read more and more and more, and you will understand how to flexibly use vocabulary. You need to cover all parts of the task. Write an introduction, write a conclusion, and put in 2 or 3 paragraphs in between. Use examples to support your position. And these examples can be personal or they can be public. Write at least 250 words, but don't write 350 words. 280 is probably the maximum, because then you will make fewer mistakes and you can check your work. Use paragraphs. Sometimes people will use headings and subheadings. Don't do that. Sometimes people will use bullet points. Don't do that. Sometimes people will use note form. Don't do that. Sometimes people will not make it clear where one paragraph ends and the next paragraph begins. Make it clear. Leave a space between those paragraphs. And always check your work. Spend a few minutes at the end of your essay to check for spelling and grammar mistakes. Okay, we've looked at Task 2. We've looked at the mistakes that a person can make. We've looked at how you should approach the task. What you need to do now is practice your English. And as I've said before many times, I think reading is an important element in understanding how a language works. In other words, unless you are reading a lot, you won't be able to write and speak as accurately as you could. If you're only at a band 5 or 6, that's okay. You won't be reading newspapers and magazines so much, but you can look for simplified articles. If you just Google articles for ESL learners, for example, and always be systematic in learning new words and grammar. Make a list of these words. Revise them every day. If there are grammar points you don't understand, there is a lot of help on the internet. Google the grammar point that you're not sure of. And believe me, I do it too. Sometimes I'm not quite sure, is that grammatical or not? I use Google. Show your work to other people. If you have a teacher that you trust, then show it to them. If you have a friend that you trust, show it to them. If you have a neighbor who speaks English, show them. They'll be happy to help you, I'm sure. Your next steps, of course, are obvious. Go to the Ielts.com website. There are lots of materials there for you to look at. Join our global community on Facebook. And as I said, we will answer questions on Facebook. Any ones we don't get to answer today, we'll put them there. We might put those essays that I was looking at today on Facebook as well. Other IELTS support materials are our support videos. You can look at those. There is the official IELTS YouTube channel, which has a lot of very important information on it as well. Okay, we've nearly come to the end of this presentation, but I'd like to remind you about our 7-day IELTS preparation challenge. It's free, and there are more details at that address down there at ielts.com. Okay, I'm ready now for questions, and I hope that you have plenty to ask me because I am keen to answer them. Let me look here at the chat box, and I'll go up to the top, and it says, Don, you are so handsome. No. It says, let me look. I scored 7.5 in writing when I first took the IELTS last week. I'll be retaking it next month. My target score is 8. I hope to learn more today. Well, I hope you did. Now, let me get to a question. Emma. Gemma.
Back. Just to point you in the right direction, Don.
Yes, thank you very much.
Can you see the Q&A box there next to the chat?
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you very much.
No worries.
I guess I'm out of practice. Okay, should we prepare any specific topics? Now, this is a very common question. And let me tell you that the IELTS item writers are people like me of a certain age who read serious newspapers. So anything in a serious newspaper that comes up, it might be about the environment, it might be about crime and punishment, it might be about education, it might be about bringing up children, it might be about urban planning. All of those topics can be used, can find their way into a writing test and a speaking test, if not to mention a reading test and a listening test as well. The more you are involved in serious issues of general interest, then the better you'll be prepared for an IELTS writing. I can't really give you a list of topics. I think they're obvious. Anything to do with education, health, cities, environment, etc. Janani Pathiraja is asking a question about a maximum word limit. There is no maximum word limit. You can write 900 words for your task 2, but don't. The more words you write, the more likely you are to make a mistake and more likely that your answer will lack focus. Remember, we talked about analyzing the task and saying, I have to answer this, 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 and this. Do that. And you can do it in about 260, 270 words. If you write 360 words, maybe you'll be talking about a whole bunch of other things as well, which is not good. Leave yourself some time at the end to check your work as well. Janani also asks about how you get a band 8 or 9. Well, I can recommend that you look at the assessment criteria on IELTS.com, and it's fairly clear what the difference is. We've looked at it in this session, what the difference is between a 7 and an 8. Well, for vocabulary and grammar, lexical resource and grammatical range and accuracy, it's how many errors you make, basically. In terms of task response. It's how well you develop your argument, your position, and how well you support it. Next question. Thanks, Gemma. You're doing a great job, by the way. If the question asks us if we agree or not, how do you best answer this? The question is, should I give background on the given topics? Well, I think you should. The example that I gave before was how to give a little bit of background. Not a lot, 1 or 2 sentences saying why this is an important question. It may also help you develop your position if you think about why it is an issue. There's no real rule. You can state your view immediately if you want to, but you must state your view somewhere, and the earlier, the better. The next question. Is it possible to get a band 8 without using uncommon words? Well, it's possible, but not possible to get an 8 for lexical resource. You might get an 8 for task response and for coherence and cohesion and for your grammar, but your lexical resource score will probably be less than an 8 without showing the examiner that you are able to use less common words. Okay, so your overall score might be an 8, but your lexical resource score, that criterion, will not be an 8. Next question. What is the minimum and maximum sentences per paragraph? There is no rule about this, but I would suggest as a rule of thumb, which is a beautiful idiom in English. In other words, it's just an approximate rule, not always true, but usually true. I would stick to 3 or 4 sentences in a paragraph. In 250 words, you can't write very many more than that. How to generate ideas for this type of question? Are there any resources which you would refer to? Yes, the sorts of resources I have mentioned already, reading magazines, newspapers and other things. But there are many resources on the internet. TED Talks, for example, if someone is talking about education, for example, or talking about the environment, or talking about crime and punishment, then they will have a lot of ideas. The more you read, the more you listen to things like that, then the better your resources will be. Janani Pathiraja has also asked this question about capitalization. In your reading and your listening, capitalization is not important. You can write English with a small e. In your essay, however, that will be considered as a punctuation error. So be careful about that. When you start a sentence, it will be starting with a capital letter. You should use a capital letter for proper nouns like English, okay? As I think I've already mentioned that about if you go over 280 words, you won't get penalized, but I would recommend that you stick to about 280 words. In a pen, or it's not a pen, we don't use a pen anymore, but it's a pencil and paper test. Do we get a rough sheet for writing parts of the test? Yes, you do. You can ask for extra paper. You can also write on the question booklet. So the question booklet in the pencil and paper test has plenty of blank space on it, and you can use that to write on as well. Next question, how to learn or improve prepositions. It's a difficult part of English, I agree. Even native speakers sometimes get it wrong. Yeah, and you'll hear native speakers using the wrong preposition sometimes, but not often. If you are able to use a good English dictionary, that will give you examples of how to use every word in that dictionary, and that's one way of memorizing it. Be an active reader. think about the sorts of prepositions that are used with particular verbs and nouns and make a note of them. When you listen to things, make a note of the prepositions. In other words, attune yourself to that element. If that is a problem for you, then think about it. The other problem with prepositions, of course, is that they are small words, and very often you don't hear them very clearly. I want to tell you. I want to tell you. Now, you didn't hear the to, but it was there. So be careful about that. Sometimes those prepositions, at, to, by, might be quite soft in spoken English. What is the difference between agree and disagree, and to what extent do you agree? No difference. They are the same question. Okay, you can answer both questions in exactly the same way. I agree completely. I disagree. I partly agree. When answering a task 2 essay and you don't have relevant examples, can you make up examples that reiterate the opinion, your own opinion? Well, yes, you can, and you should reiterate your opinion, but you do need examples as well, because the examiner wants to see support. If you are simply reiterating, repeating all the time, then really the examiner will say, well, there's not much support. It's repetitive, and this will be penalized. So think of examples. And this is a skill. Practice thinking of examples. Consider when you look at IELTS preparation materials, for example, and I gave you about 6 different tasks today, think about examples that you can come up with, and do that regularly. And when you read, as I said, be an active reader. Think of examples. Think of what your opinion is as well. Juben Sheikh has asked, please share 3 do's and 3 don'ts for the writing task. Well, I think I've already shared them, really. Do analyze the task carefully. Do plan your essay carefully. Do check your work carefully afterwards. In terms of preparation before the test, make sure you have a good sleep and you're relaxed and clear-headed, and make sure you are reading regularly. The don'ts, well, the don'ts are the opposite of those things. Make sure that you don't just start writing or giving an essay that you have prepared without looking at the actual task on the day, and make sure that you don't use a word that you're not sure about. Question, is it advisable to use metaphors in the writing test? Well, metaphors are difficult things to use in any language. A metaphor is saying something, instead of saying, there'll be some Indian listeners here, instead of saying Virat Kohli is a very good batsman, you would say Virat Kohli is the king of batsmen. Now that's a metaphor. He is not really a king, but we understand what we're saying. Metaphors are good, but make sure that you understand and can use them perfectly well, because using a metaphor or an idiom in another language is very dangerous. Gemma, are you wanting me to continue, or did you want me to wind up?
Maybe we'll take just one last question and then we'll need to wind up.
Okay. This last question from Prathana Dogra. Will I be judged to have a negative opinion, if I have a negative opinion? I'm not quite sure what this means. If you disagree with the statement, in other words, many people believe that many people say that young people are impolite, right? To use that example from this presentation. You say, well, young people are not impolite. Young people are very polite nowadays. That's okay. You can disagree with the proposition in the task, but support it. Say, for example, my nephew has, or many people in my country, etc. So make sure that you support any position. You're not really judged on whether you are politically correct. You are judged on the quality of your response. Gemma.
Thank you so much, Don. That was a fabulous webinar as usual. And thank you everyone for attending today. We had a lot of questions. I can see a lot more sitting there. So if we didn't get the chance to answer your question, please message it to us directly on Facebook at IELTS Essentials, and we will answer it for you. So we've really enjoyed bringing you these masterclass webinars over the past 4 months. Thank you to everyone who's asked a question or said hello in the comments. We've read every single one. We'll be taking a short break to create a brand new schedule of webinars for you. If there are any topics you'd like to see us cover, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your ideas. In the meantime, keep following us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on TikTok to stay up to date with expert tips and a whole heap of fun English content. So, Don, we hope to see you next time. Thanks again.
Thank you, Gemma. It's been a pleasure as always. And thank you, everybody, for listening in today.
See you.
See ya.